given by survivors of monstrous F5 tornadoes, packing winds of 350 mile per hour winds. The only difference being that tornadoes strike for just seconds, but not the tornadoes that we have seen in the recent years. Those tornadoes were like a mile wide and went on for like an hour and a half.
The storm started like 4 or 5 hours before I knew it was, because we lost phone service and everything the night before the storm came for some reason, or I did where I live, because I live out in the middle of nowhere. So I was ready for the storm to be there at like 1 or 2 o'clock, and it started hitting about 9 o'clock in the morning, just the prelim stuff, and it got really bad around 11, and it was super bad from about 11 to 8 and 9 o'clock that night, I would say. Like it was, you couldn't go outside at all, and the wind was still pretty crazy. But after that, like 3 days after, Maria just seemed to stay there, because you could see the clouds spinning up above, and you get these random like hurricane force winds that just blew out of nowhere. It was really, really weird.
Getting back to the article, the difference between that tornado strike for just seconds, whereas Hurricane Andrew struck and stayed for hours on end. The injuries of those who survived were mind-boggling. I had a broken jaw with 8 teeth knocked out. Huge shards of glass impaled my body so deeply they were impossible to remove without the aid of a scalpel. My head injuries were so severe that they permanently affected my eyesight. But I was only one amongst thousands of severely injured victims who struggled to survive the aftermath. For 10 long days, we were roped off from the outside world by United States military forces, leaving us stranded with no food, no water, no medical supplies, no shelter. Think Puerto Rico. Suffering from severe shell shock, we waited and waited for rescue teams to arrive, but that just never happened. None of the injured in the roped-off areas was ever rescued from the devastation. It was the worst gut-wrenching betrayal I have ever experienced. I saw grown men lying on the ground in the fetal position, moaning and groaning pathetically as they tried to hug and rock themselves. My son was amongst them. Don't get me wrong, the United States military forces were indeed present in the roped-off areas within hours of Andrew ending, but they were not there to help survivors. The National Guard, along with the Coast Guard, the Army, FEMA, Metro-Dade Police, state police, and local police removed dead bodies and body parts as quickly as possible during those first 10 days of the aftermath. Horrified, survivors watched as both uniformed and civilian-clothed men searched the rubble and filled body bags, which they then stacked in military vehicles or huge refrigerator trucks normally used to transport food, only to drive off and leave the stranded injured to fend for themselves. Not until I managed to escape the aftermath did I discover that the Thermo King sections of these same refrigerator trucks, jam-packed with wall-to-wall body bags, ended up being stored at Card Sound Navy Base, located in an isolated area just above the Florida Keys. The inside temperature was kept cool by portable generators until the bodies were either incinerated or just plain dumped into huge open grave pits. Those working on the body pickup operation were forced to take what is known as the Oath of Sworn Secrecy, which is strictly enforced by the government. Many of them plunged into shock, once exposed to the ghastly devastation and countless mutilated bodies. The horrors were way beyond human comprehension. I can vouch for this, as I accidentally stepped on the severed hand of a young child. when I initially crawled out of the debris, only to witness shortly thereafter 2 dead teenagers and the decapitated body of a baby girl. Fighting mental shock became such a big problem for the body pickup teams that a special group of psychiatrists had to be brought in to help them cope with it. I believe this is in itself the reason why many who worked on the body collection didn't comprehend the tragic consequences this would inevitably lead to in the future. The survivors of Hurricane Andrew and the rest of the American people were betrayed by their own government. But the betrayal also extended to foreign nationals. At the time Andrew struck, South Dade was inhabited by a large population of Mexican illegal immigrants. The United States Department of Immigration was fully aware of their presence, but quietly turned its back on the situation, knowing full well that South Dade farmers couldn't afford to harvest their crops without the help of the Mexican illegals. The heavily populated migrant camps were situated at the edge of the Florida Everglades. The people who lived there vanished without a trace during that fated night. Many bodies were found way out in the Everglades. When I lectured at the Clearwater Convention in Florida in 1999, a man in the audience stood up and introduced himself as Chief Petty Officer Roy Howard. He proceeded to address the audience with this exact statement, which is now a matter of public record. Just for your information, I was called up to active duty after Hurricane Andrew went through South Dade County. I spent 9 weeks down there. Now I will certify, for the benefit of our audience here, that the death figures that were officially published are totally inaccurate. According to the information which I received from my own sources within the National Guard, the figure I was quoted when I was down there was 5,280 something. And they were quietly disposed of in incinerators that were hurriedly put together by both the National Guard and FEMA. As the Chief Petty Officer stated, 5,280 something bodies were confiscated by the U.S. National Guard. In addition to this, the Coast Guard independently confiscated 1,500 bodies from the lakes and surrounding waters. Neither one of these figures embraces the number of dead bodies confiscated by other branches of federal and state government directly involved in the body pickup operation. This leaves the number of dead confiscated by various U.S. authorities in South Dade still unknown. The total number who died during Hurricane Andrew is obviously staggering. Yet whenever the official death toll is mentioned in the media, a figure of anywhere between 15 and 59 is quoted. The population of the 21 communities annihilated by Andrew's eyewall had been officially recorded by the Dade County Census Bureau as 415,151 before Andrew struck. Bodies of human beings confiscated and disposed of like rubbish, as if their lives had no more worth or meaning than a piece of discarded litter. It's horrifying to be suddenly confronted by the same kind of atrocities as perpetrated by the Nazis. Once again, repeating history, a master-minded cover-up was dutifully carried out by armed military forces right smack in the midst of horrendous human suffering. To complete this historical comparison, in the same way that many residents who lived near Nazi concentration camps were unaware or in denial of the atrocities close by, so too were many residents who were located just outside the catastrophic devastation left behind by Andrew's eye wall. So what exactly did take place when Andrew survivors tried to get up from those collecting dead bodies in the aftermath? Did I say get up or get help? I'm sorry. Tried to get help from those collecting dead bodies. Well, I, for one, can give a first-hand account. About the third day into the aftermath, a long line of police cars cautiously drove into my area during the late afternoon. We had not had contact with any other people from outside the devastation up until this point. There were approximately 12 to 15 police cars comprising this caravan, each marked from different locations throughout the state. Each car was driven by a man dressed in a dark police uniform and had 3 other plain-clothed men riding as passengers, making a total of 4 men in each vehicle. Someone from our group spotted the caravan and ran to get me, knowing that I had been badly injured and urgently needed emergency medical help. My 25-year-old son and 1 other adult male survivor helped escort me to the caravan. We hurried towards the lead car. It stopped moving when we approached the driver's side. The officer sitting behind the wheel rolled down the window. For a few moments, he rudely ignored us, at one point giving us an impatient look of disgust. This is the exact conversation and course of events that took place. "Please, sir, I need medical help," I begged, barely able to speak. The officer sitting behind the wheel sighed heavily. He turned his head away from me and gazed out his windshield. The other 3 men in the car quietly looked at me. "Sir, please, I need to get to a hospital," I begged frantically. The officer took his time about reaching over to turn off the engine. With another sigh, he slowly opened the door and climbed out. He then proceeded to close the door and stood there with his legs spread astride. "Lady, do me a favor," he answered. "Find yourself a piece of paper and a pencil. Write down your name and social security number next to the telephone number of your nearest living relative. Tuck the piece of paper in your pocket so tomorrow when I find your body, I'll know who to contact." "No, no," I cried out. "You don't understand. I need to get to a hospital. I've been badly injured." "No, you're the one who doesn't understand," he hissed back. With that, he reached over to his holster and took out his gun. He grabbed me, forcing me up against the side of the car, and proceeded to put the barrel of the gun against my temple. I heard the hammer cock. From the position he had pushed me into, I could see directly into the car. The man sitting in the front passenger seat looked away from me immediately, glancing down at the floor. The 2 passengers in the back seat turned their heads quickly, staring out the window on the opposite side of the car. My son and the other survivor watched as the officer had pulled back the hammer on the gun, so shocked out of their minds by what they were witnessing, neither one could move. "You don't belong here," the officer growled, pressing the barrel into the side of my head. "Now you get the hell out of here before I blow away your ass." He shoved my face into the car window and then released me. Someone grabbed me from behind and whirled me around so fast I didn't have time to think. Before I knew it, I was being thrown over a shoulder. My rescuer took off running as fast as he could. I caught a brief glimpse of my son running next to me. With one gigantic leap, he and the survivor who carried me dove behind a pile of debris. All 3 of us crashed on top of each other in one tangled up heap. "I'll shoot your damn asses," the officer's voice rang out. When Hurricane Andrew slammed into South Dade, the state attorney of Florida was none other than Janet Reno. Her office was located at the Dade County Courthouse in the city of Miami. The President of the United States was President George H. Bush. and the vice president was Dan Quayle. Bill Clinton was running for president, and Al Gore for vice president. Senator Bob Graham held office, and the late Lawton Chiles was governor of Florida. His successor turned out to be Jeb Bush, still the governor of Florida, and ironically enough, the son of former President Bush, whose other son, George W. Bush, the then governor of Texas, has since become the self-selected president of the United States. Curious how the United States government evacuated Homestead Air Force Base just before Hurricane Andrew struck, yet never released the information to the civilians of South Dade. This is worse than anything we saw in Saudi, said Master Sergeant Lester Richardson, who had spent 6 months in the Middle East during Operation Desert Storm. 1 week into the aftermath, these people need a miracle. The survivors did need a miracle, but what we got instead didn't resemble anything near it. While we remained roped off from the outside world by Metro Dade police and the military, the news media reported grossly understated information from the first day onward. On August 24, 1992, the morning Hurricane Andrew ended, the Miami Herald broke with, "Andrew hits hardest in South Dade. 5,000 people were left homeless by the storm. Metro Dade Police Director announced. They'll be moved into shelters in North Dade." Over subsequent days, the Miami Herald read as follows: August 25, destruction at dawn. Among worst hit in the country walk area of South Dade, few homes escaped at least minor damage, and many were utterly destroyed. 10 killed in Dade. August 27, the toll rises. 22 dead as the search continues. 63,000 homes destroyed. 175,000 homeless. 1 million without power. August 28, we need help. Relief effort collapsing due to United States inaction. Metro charges. We're hearing the same thing in Puerto Rico right now. And we're hearing very little from Houston and the surrounding areas. But aid us now, or more will die, feds told. As Dade County's hurricane relief effort near collapsed Thursday, more than 1,500 airborne U.S. soldiers were ordered into the county to cope with what is now being called the worst natural disaster in United States history. The move came after a day of bitter sniping among agencies that share responsibility for the relief effort. And it's exactly what we are saying in Puerto Rico. United States aid official Wallace Stickler stated, Andrew has caused more destruction and affected more people than any disaster America has ever had. Dade County's emergency director pleaded for federal help, one angry voice among many that spoke in dire terms of needs unmet. Frustrated to the point of tears, Kate Hale said that the relief project was on the brink of collapse, a victim of incompetence and political games. Where the hell is the cavalry on this one? We need food, we need water, we need people. If we do not get more food into the South Dade, in a very short period of time, we are going to have more casualties. We have a catastrophic disaster. We are hours away from more casualties. We are essentially the walking wounded. We have appealed through the state to the federal government. We've had a lot of people down here for press conferences, but Dade County is on its own. Dade County is being caught in the middle of something, and we are being victimized. Quit playing like a bunch of kids and get us aid. Sort out your political games afterward. And we are hearing many people say just that with Puerto Rico, with what's happening in Puerto Rico. On the same day, Hal made the desperate plea. Miami Herald staff writers Martin Mercer and Tom Felder wrote, the question echoed through the debris Thursday. If we can do it for Bangladesh, for the Philippines, for the Kurds of northern Iraq, why in God's name can't we deliver basic necessities of life to the ravaged population of our own Gold Coast? But who knows what we're doing in the Philippines and Bangladesh and for the Kurds of northern Iraq. But the short answer, because no single person or agency is in charge. The result, a plane load of food and equipment is still a rarity. Instead of delivering goods, helicopter pilots shuttle government officials who just sit idle. Metro police turn away individuals trying to bring in food or water to a barren South Dade. And we have seen that in Houston. It seems that they have a script to follow with each disaster. On August 29, 1992, 6 days into the aftermath, the Miami Herald reported, problems plague Red Cross. The man on the phone wanted to donate 100 electric generators, extension cords, and enough tools to build a small subdivision, but the operator who took his call at the Red Cross Command Center in Miami had no idea what to do with the offer. We get a call, we take a message, we give it to somebody who signs it to somebody else. We have no idea what happens to it. The whole place is being run by senior citizens and college kids. Welcome to Red Cross headquarters, where the brains of Dade County rescue effort have been knocked almost unconscious most of the week. Callers offering services and supplies are put on hold. Others can't get through at all. The hurt and suffering plead for help over ham radio. On August 29, 1 week after Hurricane Andrew struck, the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel reported 250,000 people homeless in South Dade. Of course, the rather insignificant incident resulting from Andrew's winds bombarding the Turkey Point nuclear power plant was not aired by the news media either, nationally or abroad. The Miami Herald reported on September 5, demolition crews toppled a 400-foot smokestack at Turkey Point power plant. The stack, which had a gaping 200-foot crack, was dropped without a hitch. A Florida Power and Light spokesman said, the other smokestack at the plant will be salvaged. Turkey Point will be shut down for several months while repairs are made. The cost will exceed $90 million. When Turkey Point was built in the 1960s, its main structures were designed to withstand 235 mile-per-hour winds. Hurricane Andrew was clocked at 164 mile-per-hour winds at the plant. Florida Power and Light officials don't know why the smokestack didn't hold up. $100 million worth of damage resulted from the nuclear power plant smokestack having been cracked wide open. The plant is situated approximately 15 miles northeast of where I live, or where I lived. How well I recall, the leaflets circulated several months before Andrew struck advising all residents within a 35-mile radius of Turkey Point nuclear plant to be aware of the potential hazards involved if an event such as a natural disaster or unexpected catastrophe happened. Such a grim reminder of the Chernobyl tragedy could be more than a coincidence that within 24 hours of Hurricane Andrew ending, all 12 survivors in my little group, including our animals, broke out in big, raw, oozing sores, which itched and burned at the same time. We suffered horrible headaches, which made us so nauseous. We had the dry heaves, and our stomachs cramped badly from sudden onset of diarrhea. These symptoms, these symptoms lasted well over 3 months. Within a relatively short period of time, each one of our surviving animals died from cancer. Speaking of coincidence, I often wonder what kind of a coincidence it is that the National Hurricane Bureau is responsible for reporting to the U.S. Department of Commerce, especially considering that during 1992, South Florida did $31 billion worth of trade in tourism. I think I read that wrong, I'm sorry. What a coincidence it is that the Bureau is responsible for reporting to the Commerce Department. Hurricane Andrew had barely left Florida, heading for Louisiana, when the Division of Tourism placed a $47,000 advertisement in USA Today reading, "Florida, we're still open." Most people have very short memories. We're all sort of banking on that. And that comes from Donal Modi, director of the Nova University Center for Hospitality Management. Kind of puts a big damper on belief in the human race. Hide the truth, ignore the suffering, do it for $1. What upsets me most is the incident that happened during the late afternoon hours just prior to Andrew's striking. I had just walked out to the garbage dumpsters located by the parking lot to throw away some garbage. I turned to head back to the apartment when the horn of an oncoming car began blasting away. I looked up to see a familiar resident whom I had spoken to on many different occasions heading directly towards me. This particular individual worked at Metro Zoo. Being affiliated with wild animals, he frequently stopped by to ask me questions about the behavior of certain species. He sped right up to me and then slammed on the brakes. "Come here," he whispered excitedly. I leaned down close to him. "What's the matter?" "Listen," he paused to look around nervously. "You've got to get the hell out of here now." "Why?" I asked, puzzled by his behavior. "I haven't got time to explain," he whispered, "but I just came from the National Hurricane Bureau in the Gables. Got a friend of mine who works over there. Bigwig. Know what I mean?" Yeah, I nodded. "Well, this isn't for public information, if you get my drift." He went on rapidly. "But the National Hurricane Bureau has known all along that Hurricane Andrew is going to slam into South Dade. They're telling the public it's going to come in at Palm Beach because they want Miami Beach evacuated. And there aren't enough shelters for South Dade residents to evacuate to. They don't want to cause panic. So they're keeping quiet. We're all a bunch of goddamn sitting ducks. You got to get the hell out of here. This is a killer hurricane. Nobody's ever seen anything like it before." "Holy shit," I exclaimed, shocked out of my mind. "You mean Andrew's coming over South Dade?" "Damn straight. That's exactly what I mean. They figure the eye of the storm is coming right in over us. Those fellas at the National Hurricane Bureau have known it all along. I'm getting the hell out of here. Shit, man, this thing is a killer hurricane. Listen, I gotta run, get your son, and get the hell out now. You ain't gonna have a shot in hell once it hits. I ran into the apartment. I called my son, begging him to come home so we could get out. I had no reason to disbelieve anything I just heard. I knew my neighbor well enough to know he wouldn't fabricate anything like this, so I related the entire conversation to my son, Eric. He was stunned. Eric said he would leave work within a few minutes, but minutes dragged on for hours. Another immediate course of action I took after hearing the terrifying warning from my neighbor was to phone the local CBS television station located in Miami. I called 3 separate times. Each time my call went directly into the local news broadcast room of meteorologist Brian Norcross. Although I never spoke to Norcross directly, I did manage to speak to 3 separate individuals working in the broadcast room. I specifically stated I live in South Dade, adjacent to Metro Zoo, and within walking distance of Country Walk, in a prefab apartment that is constructed to withstand up to 90-mile-per-hour winds. I asked, should I evacuate? All 3 individuals advised and reassured me that I was situated in a safe area. There definitely was a need for me to take any evacuation measures. Meanwhile, one work catastrophe after another seemed to crash down on my son, until finally it was just too late for us to evacuate. By the time he got home, it was almost midnight. Within minutes of his arrival, Andrew slammed into us with full force. I will link below. You can read the last 2 sections. The cover-ups, the missing, the dead, the lies coming out of mainstream media, the not alerting residents, military suddenly blocking out people from the world. What is going on in Houston? What is going on in the surrounding area of Houston? What is going on in Puerto Rico? The fires, FEMA, Red Cross, still an organization that gets Americans to donate hundreds of millions of dollars, and hardly any of it goes to the victims. I was thinking about what I was doing in 1992, in August. I was gearing up for law school, believing what I was hearing. So, how is it that some of us come out of this incredibly sick, twisted matrix of ours, and so many don't? The link is below.
Sing countdown, engines on. 3, 2, check ignition.